Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by thelines.com. My name is Eli Hershkovich. My co-host is Nuwwarah, senior MLB analyst for thelines.com. And you can follow The Lines on Twitter at TheLinesUS. Recording here on Wednesday, May 3rd. Breaking down today's MLB card. A couple bets for Mo with the Guardians at the Yankees and the Brewers at the Rockies. But first and foremost, remember to give the video a thumbs up and ring the bell to get notifications whenever The Lines releases a new sports betting video on any market. And you could also have a chance to win a $25 Amazon gift card in our daily MLB Pick'em contest. For more details, head over to play.thelines.com. Mo, before we get into your bets, 2-0 card yesterday, so I'll give you the chance to take a deep breath after a rough couple days.
Yeah, it was good to get back in the W column. Made some strong plays yesterday. Beat the market on both of them. That hasn't always been working out for me, but this time not only did we beat the market, but based on the way the games played out, they both looked like very good bets. Orioles had like 18 hits or something, and just like I said, a lot of Royals pen there. They had to use their kind of like lesser relievers, and not a good situation for them. And then on the other side, Boston did a fine job against the Blue Jays.
And I said it yesterday, I'll say it again today. For anybody betting on baseball, it's so similar, not necessarily in regards to the market itself and efficiency, but to the NBA, college basketball. Very different if you're a casual NFL bettor considering, or college football for that matter. Again, depends on the context, but just those two sports I just mentioned, week by week. Baseball is day to day, and a 162 game season. You better be ready for the grind and the ups and downs and the downswings, especially with bullpen variants. But regardless of how well or how poorly you did yesterday, there are a couple things to note. At least you're not the St. Louis Cardinals, nor the Golden State Warriors, and especially Jordan Poole after the shot he took last night in the closing seconds against the Lakers. But I digress, Mo. On to a 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time first pitch. Guardians at Yankees. The two teams split the first two games in the series so far. Cleveland is minus 130 on the money line. Tonight, Shane Bieber against Clark Schmidt, and Bieber has a 3.11 ERA, but a 4.72 xERA. Has pitched well against New York in his last couple starts, though, including the playoffs last year and an outing on April 10th. 7 innings pitched, just 2 earned runs allowed. And then you look at Clark Schmidt, and it's rough. 6.84 ERA, a 6.30 xERA, so he's pitched pretty much to expectations so far. The fastball spin rate and curveball spin as well have graded out very well so far for Schmidt, but he is getting barreled a lot, and his hard hit rate, opponent's hard hit rate, ranks in the bottom third percentile this season. So Yankees lineup is banged up offensively, Mo, and Aaron Judge at the forefront of those concerns. But how are you betting Cleveland and New York overall?
Yeah, I think you hit on the big key for me here is definitely what's left of this Yankees lineup. No Aaron Judge, no Giancarlo Stanton. Bottom of the order projection is Willie Calhoun, Oswaldo Cabrera, Kyle Higashioka, and Aaron Hicks. I think it's safe to say that wasn't the powerhouse lineup the Yankees were planning on having on the field this year, and the results have reflected the guys they've had out there. They when I filtered in for just the past week, obviously small sample, but we have to thin slice it when we're looking at this lineup, right? And they have a 78 WRC plus in the past week, which, I don't like using like arbitrary endpoints a lot, but when you're talking about injuries and stuff like this, I think it makes sense. It hasn't been a good lineup. I don't think it projects to be a good lineup. I don't think it projects to be much better, if at all, than what Cleveland's running out there. And they have a huge advantage at starting pitching, I think. I will say if Shane Bieber keeps pitching like he has been pitching, which is mediocre, then this bet's not going to end up being very good. but his track record is so long and so solid. I mean, 4, I think, years of just basically very, very strong play. I just have to believe this is probably a small sample blip. I was looking through his stuff, and I couldn't really find anything too crazy, even though he has dropped a lot of swinging strikes, and he is allowing a high exit velocity. But I can't find really any difference in any of his pitchers other than some horizontal break changes. So I don't know, with all of his years of consistency, I think it's way too early to kind of get bent out of shape about the runs he's allowed so far. So I'm still projecting him as close to an elite arm. And yeah, like you said, Clark Schmidt, he's been a little bit rough. He's missing bats, but I think maybe the contact stuff is real. Lefties have crushed him so far in a small sample in his career. Almost all of Cleveland's best hitters are left-handed or switch, so I think it's a decent matchup for the Guardians. The bad xERA is kind of where you do see, like you said, the contact quality has been pretty bad. I'm not sure if he's a starting pitcher, to be honest. I think a lot of people had him projected in the bullpen, so it would make sense for me if he does have a pretty rough platoon split and if he isn't really cut out for starting in MLB, but we'll see how things go. I mean, I've always usually been a believer in guys like him who do miss bats, but yeah, the contact quality has not been good so far.
Yankees rotation, obviously, without a couple of key arms. Frankie Montas, 1, and Carlos Rodon, who was the big offseason signing for New York's starting rotation, was supposed to be slated behind Garrett Cole within it, and there's no timetable for Rodon to come back.
Shocker, he had a setback.
I'm used to this from his White Sox days. Now, Rodon was one of the favorites entering the season in the AL Cy Young betting market, and you look at the odds right now, Mo. Garrett Cole plus 300 mentioned his dominance for the Yankees a lot so far this season. Shohei Ohtani, who pitches tonight against St. Louis, want to touch on the Cardinals to wrap up the podcast in a funny way at plus 350. Shane McClanahan for the Rays at plus 800. Then it's Castillo for Seattle, Kevin Gausman for Toronto, both sitting at plus 1200. Then right around or right behind them, or a little bit back, is Joe Ryan at plus 2,500 on FanDuel Sportsbook. He is as high as 50-1 at Caesars. So the market differs a bit on one of the Twins' better starters, and a pitcher that I made a bet on going back to a little bit before the season began at 100-1 to win AL Cy Young. Now, hot starts, small samples don't always pan out, as you mentioned, Mo, especially when we're talking about a Yankees lineup without their 2 best hitters in it, and Judge and Stanton, when we're kind of dissecting whether it's WRC plus or whatever metric it may be. But Ryan added a couple key pitches in the offseason, and he pitched very well at Chicago last night. So is Joe Ryan a legitimate AL Cy Young candidate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think when you add a pitch like that and you are having the success he's having after he's already been a solid pitcher, I think 25-1 makes a hell of a lot more sense than 50-1. That's for sure. Yeah, he's been tremendous so far, and the Twins are having the type of team success, fingers crossed that continues, that could boost his candidacy. I will say
division
it's
is
going
so
to be
bad.
What'd you say?
The AL Central, the division is so bad.
It's been rough. I will say it's going to be tough to unseat Garrett Cole, because the thing about Cole that's just really sets him apart is he's just such a machine. He just never, ever gets hurt, man. I mean, so that adds up in the end, when you're talking about WAR at the end of the season. WAR is a counting stat. So people are going to be looking at that, and his is going to be very high because he just, like clockwork, makes 30-plus starts per year. And, yeah, based on how he's pitching, obviously, he's going to be tough to unseat. I would say, honestly, McClanahan stands out too, 8-1. He's been as good as anybody, and he's reached Jacob deGrom swinging strike and chase territory. Like, I don't understand him being that far behind Garrett Cole and Ohtani. I think he should be right there with them, to be honest. And then one more name I'll throw out is Logan Gilbert, man. He's in the same boat as Joe Ryan, where added a pitch in the offseason, and it has boosted him to much higher talent level than he had before, I think. So all strong candidates, but yeah, Cole is rightfully the favorite just because he's like clockwork, like I said, every year. 30 starts, 3 ERA, million strikeouts. It's going to be tough to beat him.
You mentioned pitching war. Cole is at the top among AL starters. No shock there at 1.9. And Nathan Eovaldi for the Rangers right behind him. I don't know how long that'll last, but we've seen him pitch well in Boston now with the Rangers. And we've touched on Texas's hot start a lot. Jacob deGrom, who is hurt, no surprise there, at 1.4 in terms of his pitching war. And Gausman and Sonny Gray, also of the Twins, right there with the same pitching war. So it is tough when we discuss a long shot candidate like Ryan if he's going up against a teammate of his in the race as well. I don't know how long either of them will last, but it's tough to, when you're talking about, again, a long shot trying to unseat a fellow starter on your own team. But on to the final game on the card, Mo, at 8:40 p.m. Eastern time, first pitch, Milwaukee at Colorado. And the Rockies took the first game of this series last night. Veteran lefty Kyle Freeland on the mound for them tonight. And you think they could take the first two in this series?
Yeah, two of the worst offenses, the two worst offenses so far against lefties, matching up here against two lefties. So this should be interesting in Coors. Could see absolutely anything happening here. Thing about this one is, though, the Rockies were actually decent against lefties last year with a very similar group of players. And that's with Chris Bryant missing a ton of time, and he's been a lefty killer his whole career. And I think they profile as an offense that should be okay against lefties. They have multiple kind of either lefty killers like Bryant or guys who have hit lefties well, CJ Cron, Randall Grichuk, guys like that. I don't think this offense is the absolute worst against even Charlie Blackmon, a guy who people matched up lefties against him for years. He's actually had a reverse split for like 3 years in a row now. So I think the Rockies are going to be okay against lefties. Milwaukee, bad last year, awful this year. Eric Lauer, he is recovering some of his velocity. He was like alarmingly low to start this season, but still sitting 91, which is 2 miles per hour worse than he was last year. So I don't think he profiles well in Coors either because he's such a heavy fly ball guy. Batted ball wise, also the Rockies do match up pretty well against him. I think because of their batted ball distribution, looks like it should be okay. They do hit a lot of grounders, which usually profiles well against a fly baller. And, Kyle Freeland, not a guy who is going to blow you away, not a guy who really has any better peripherals than what Eric Lauer's putting out there so far. But I would say the contact quality has been quite a bit better. You can see that in their xERA, barrels, exit velocity. These are all better for Kyle Freeland so far. He has been a guy who has been able to manage contact. He has been a guy who's been able to manage Coors. So I think given all that, I had this as wrong team favored. I know the Rockies are not very big underdogs, but anything plus I think is pretty good for them here. So I was able to get plus 105. Nothing's really changed on that front so far. I think most of the market's at plus 100, and I think that's decent.
Brewers in second place right behind the Pirates, and we'll discuss Pittsburgh on our long-form podcast. Once again, beat the closing number. Find it in your Apple, Spotify podcast feeds, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We'll do that sometime tomorrow afternoon, should be out later in the day. But with the AL Central, or NL Central, that is, we were discussing the Twins in the AL Central earlier. Now, Milwaukee, like I mentioned, obviously in the race, and they're the favorite right now to win the division right behind Pittsburgh in the standings, at least from an outright perspective. St. Louis, 10-20, 10 games below 500. Steven Matz implodes in the first inning last night. And I want to throw a couple stats at you, not necessarily to have a discussion, but more so because it outlines exactly what we discussed with the Cardinals all year so far. St. Louis, 24th in rotation stuff plus. Then you look at bullpen metrics, and they are 5th in strikeout minus walk rate. And then you look at their lineup, 11th in WRC plus, 12th in weighted on base average, 10th in barrels, and just overall, you mentioned how they've had some negative regression when it's come to wins this season. 13th in outs above average, 11th in defensive runs saved. So the starting pitching is bad for St. Louis, to put it lightly, and it's not going to get much better. So the more we talk about and the longer we get in the season with the Cardinals and with this division, you have to wonder if it's too little too late already, especially when you get to the midsummer and the All-Star break, when St. Louis, if they're sitting around this mark, maybe 5 or 6 games back, let's say, in the division at that point, if they're going to be in a position to buy. I'm not sure. And the pitching is a massive issue for the Cardinals. But we'll discuss more of that as the season moves along. And again, be sure to check out our long-form Beat the Closing Number podcast. But for Nuwwarah, my name is Eli Hershkovich. Thanks again for listening to another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by thelines.com. We'll be back tomorrow with more of Mo's MLB Bets. So long, everybody.